The 19th century was an age of fire and iron, a time when empires rose and fell, when the roar of industry drowned out the whispers of the oppressed. And in the heart of this chaos, a man emerged, a thinker whose ideas would shake the foundations of the world. His name was Karl Marx, philosopher, revolutionary, a man who dared to imagine a different future. But who was he, really? Behind the manifestos, the revolutions, the endless debates, what drove this man to challenge the very order of society? To understand Marx, we must first step into his world, a world on the brink of transformation. Karl Heinrich Marx was born on May 5, 1818, in the quiet town of Trier, in what was then the Kingdom of Prussia. His family was middle class, educated, but they were also Jews in a Europe that was deeply hostile to them. His father, Heinrich, a lawyer, converted to Lutheranism to escape persecution, a decision that would shape young Karl's understanding of power, oppression, and survival. As a student, Marx was brilliant but rebellious. He studied law, philosophy, and history, but his true passion was questioning everything. At the University of Berlin, he fell under the spell of the radical philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, whose ideas about history as a constant struggle fascinated him. But Marx was never one to simply accept, he was destined to overturn. Then came the moment that changed everything. In 1842, Marx became a journalist for the Rheinische Zeitung, a liberal newspaper where he wrote scathing critiques of government censorship and the suffering of the poor. His words were sharp, dangerous, and soon, the Prussian authorities had enough. The paper was shut down. Marx was exiled. At just 25 years old, he was forced to flee Germany, beginning a life of wandering, poverty, and relentless writing. But in his exile, he would meet the man who would become his greatest collaborator, and together they would ignite a revolution of thought. Exiled, hunted, disillusioned. By 1843, Karl Marx was a man without a country, but never without a cause. Paris became his refuge, a city alive with revolution, where poets, philosophers, and radicals whispered of upheaval. And here, in the back rooms of rundown cafes, Marx would forge a partnership that would change history. Friedrich Engels was everything Marx was not. Wealthy, charming, the son of a German industrialist. But beneath his polished exterior burned the same fiery outrage at the injustices of the world. When they met in 1844, it was more than friendship. It was the meeting of two minds destined to set the world ablaze. Engels had seen the horrors of industrial capitalism firsthand. In England, he documented the misery of the working class. Children with broken backs, families starving in squalor, all to feed the machines of progress. His writings shocked Marx to the core. Together, they began to ask a dangerous question. What if the workers fought back? In 1845, Marx was expelled from Paris. He fled to Brussels, then to London, always writing, always agitating. And then, in 1848, as revolutions erupted across Europe, Marx and Engels published a short, explosive pamphlet. Its opening lines would echo through the ages. A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. The Manifesto was a call to arms, not just for workers, but for history itself. Marx argued that capitalism was not eternal. It was a system built on exploitation, and like all systems before it, it would fall. The people, he declared, had nothing to lose but their chains. London. The year is 1850. Karl Marx is now a man without a country, hounded by governments, abandoned by old allies. He lives in a cramped two-room flat in Soho, surrounded by the ghosts of failed revolutions. His children are hungry. His wife, Jenny, pawns the family silver just to buy bread. And yet, he writes, the revolutions of 1848 had been crushed. The old order had reasserted itself with bullets and bayonets. And Marx, once the fiery voice of insurrection, was now just another penniless exile, watching history pass him by. Or so it seemed, because Marx was not finished. If the workers' uprising had failed, he would arm them with something more powerful than barricades: knowledge. He buried himself in the British Museum, studying the inner workings of capitalism with the precision of a surgeon dissecting a corpse. And what he found would become his life's work, Das Kapital. Here, in this labyrinth of numbers and theories, Marx laid bare the brutal logic of capitalism, the way it devoured labor, concentrated wealth, and doomed itself to crisis. It was not a manifesto, it was a prophecy, and as the 19th century wore on, his predictions began to come true. Economic collapses, strikes, the slow, gathering fury of the working class. force. Marx's ideas, once mocked, now haunted the halls of power. But for the man himself, there would be no victory. Revolutionaries are not made of stone. Marx buried 3 of his children in exile. His health crumbled under years of poverty and overwork, and with each loss, his letters grew darker, more bitter. "I am plagued like Job," he wrote, though not as God-fearing. Through it all, only 2 things never left him: his wife, Jenny's devotion, and his unshakable belief that history was on his side, even as the world ignored him, even as his body failed him. On March 14, 1883, Karl Marx died in his armchair, his final manuscript unfinished. Only 11 people attended his funeral. The gravediggers did not know who he was, and yet the man was gone. The specter remained. They buried him in Highgate Cemetery in 1883, thinking the revolution died with him. They were wrong. Within decades, half the world would fly the red flag in his name. Empires would fall. Wars would be fought. And all of it, every revolution, every purge, every hopeful experiment, would bear the stamp of a dead philosopher who never held power, never saw his vision realized, but whose ideas refused to die. When the Bolsheviks stormed the Tsar's palace, they did it with Marx's words on their lips. Lenin kept Das Kapital by his bedside like a Bible. But here was the great irony. Marx had written of revolution coming from industrialized workers, yet it was peasant Russia, backward and feudal, that embraced him first. And the results were not what he predicted. The 20th century became a laboratory for Marx's ideas, and the experiments often turned monstrous. Stalin's purges, Mao's great leap forward, the killing fields of Cambodia. Millions died under regimes that claimed to speak for the proletariat, and critics asked, was this the inevitable end of Marx's vision, or its betrayal? Yet after the Cold War, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when they declared Marxism dead, it kept coming back. The financial crashes of 2008, the yawning gap between rich and poor, the gig economies exploited workers. Each crisis revived the same old questions. Was Marx wrong, or just ahead of his time? The real Marx was neither saint nor demon. He was a man of contradictions, a theorist who praised the working class yet rarely set foot in a factory, a father who wept for his dead children while dismissing family as a bourgeois institution, a revolutionary who spent his life in libraries. He loved Shakespeare. He adored his wife. He fought lifelong boils with the same stubbornness he fought capitalism. This is the Marx we forget, not the cold icon, but the flawed, brilliant, relentless human being. Because here's the truth. We still live in Marx's world. The factories are now algorithms. The proletariat delivers your groceries for apps. The crises keep coming. And whether you see him as prophet or heretic, his central question burns brighter than ever. Can a system built on endless growth ever be just? Or must it, as he predicted, eventually consume itself? Marx failed to foresee much, but he understood one thing with terrifying clarity: that capitalism is not natural, not eternal, just one more chapter in history's long struggle. And history is not done writing. The specter still haunts. If you found this journey through Marx's legacy thought-provoking, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most explosive ideas. This is The Past Unfolded, where history never stops speaking.